men know of the binding of Fenrir's wolf, and how that great wolf was bound by a cord no thicker than a hair. But few know what happened after. For as you know, the great god Tyr had put his sword hand in the wolf's mouth as surety against trickery. And that hand was savage when the wolf found he was well and truly bound. So Tyr, clumsily, wrong-handedly, drew his sword with his left hand, and looking at the mangled wreck of what had been the finest sword hand in Asgard, cut that hand off at the wrist. And his blood ran upon the stone, and down the rainbow bridge, and fell into Midgard, where, if you find a green stone spotted with red, that is the blood of Tyr. It is a sacred thing. But Tyr stood with his blood running upon the ground, and the gods feared that he would die. And at length, Loki, with tears streaming down his face, catching in his russet beard, yanked a torch from the hall and held it out, pleadingly. And Tyr thrust the bleeding stump of his arm into the flame and seared the wound closed. And then he walked into his hall and shut the door. There was no joy in Asgard that night, for all the gods feared that Tyr might die. And the goddesses Frigg and Freya and the Valkyries took turns tending him, but he did not speak. And he responded to no one, and they feared. But at length he rose up from his bed, and he came forth into the sunlight, but he was forever changed. For his hair had been golden as the grain, and it was now as silver as the blade of that sword. And his face, which had been merry, was lined and dark with care. So he went that day to the hall of Bolin, who, as you know, flew to Asgard on wings of his own making, and he is a god for all craftsmen. But he does not leave his hall as he is lame. And Tyr entered Bolin's smithy, and Bolin paused in what he was doing, and said, "How may I aid you, my lord Tyr?" And Tyr said, "Nay, Bolin, call me not lord. You are the lord here. The craftsman is always lord in his own hall. I come to ask you a favor. If it is a thing within my power, you may have it. Bolin, can you make me a hand?" And Bolin thought. And all the while, unaware, his hands moved the irons in the fire that they not burn. And at length he said, "Oh, a hand of metal I could make you easily enough to grip and to hold, but give it the skill your lost hand had, I cannot do. You would never be satisfied. I'm sorry." And Tyr paused a moment and then said, "No, Bolin, I apologize to you. It was my pride and my vanity that brought me here, not my wisdom. You are the wiser of us. I will go home." And he went home. But Bolin was unsatisfied. And he sent for Loki, who, as you know, can go anywhere. And they talked long into the night, and Loki left on an errand. And he was gone for some days, and he returned with something that he took to Bolin's forge. And Bolin locked himself in, and for 3 days he worked upon the metal that Loki had brought him. It was the finest dwarven silver. And he pounded, and he graved, and he chafed, and he repoussed, and he made a thing. And when he was done with it, he put it into a box lined with silken cloth, and sent it to the hall of Tyr with the Valkyrie, for as I said, he does not go out as he is lame. And Tyr came to the door, opened it, took the casket from the Valkyrie, and set it upon a table in his hall. And he opened it, moved aside the cloth, and lifted out a gleaming silver armband, cunningly wrought, and made so that it fit from the wrist to the elbow of his right arm. And graven all around it, in figures so alive they seemed to move and breathe, was the story of Tyr and Fenris Wolf. And at the end, there were pictures of Tyr, with the sword in his left hand, facing Ragnarok, triumphant. And the last face of all was blank, because Bolin is very wise. And Tyr put the armband on, and it fit as though it were his own skin. And he looked at it. And he looked especially at that last empty space. And he threw back his head as he laughed. And his laughter rang in the rafters of his hall, because he knew what Bolin had tried to tell him. Our weird is not carved in stone. We make our own fortunes. And he took his sword and went into the garden to practice left-handed. So I tell you, my friends, there is this. No matter how dire things may seem, no matter what you have lost, no matter how down you are, there is always hope.
Morgana Bro Morganwg, living in the kingdom of Tyr, citizen of Aldermere, at the Known World Cooks and Bards 2019.